The journey of Abraham, a story of faith and obedience. Once upon a time, in the ancient land of Mesopotamia, there lived a man named Abraham, who was renowned for his unwavering faith and deep righteousness. His story is one of the most significant in biblical history and is filled with moments of divine intervention, faith-testing trials, and ultimate blessings. Let's delve into the inspiring journey of Abraham, a man chosen by God for a divine purpose, whose faith changed the course of history. The story begins when God calls Abram, as he was originally known. One day, as Abram was going about his daily life in the city of Ur of the Chaldeans, God spoke to him. God commanded Abram to leave his homeland, his relatives, and his father's household, and journey to a land that he would show him. God promised Abram that he would make him into a great nation, bless him, and make his name great, so that he would be a blessing to others. In this divine call, Abram was offered a remarkable destiny, but it also required immense trust and obedience to step out into the unknown. Without hesitation, Abram, who was 75 years old at the time, obeyed God's command. He gathered his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions, and set out on a journey of faith. They traveled westward from Ur, crossing the Euphrates River, and ventured towards the land of Canaan. This was no small feat, as they left behind everything they knew: family, security, and familiarity, all for the promise of an unseen land and a future that rested in God's hands. Along the way, they stopped in various places, building altars and calling on the name of the Lord. However, as Abram's journey unfolded, challenges arose. Conflict soon developed between the herdsmen of Abram and those of his nephew Lot. The land they were occupying was unable to support both groups due to their growing wealth and large flocks. Tensions escalated between the two families. To prevent further strife and maintain peace, Abram, with his characteristically generous spirit, offered Lot the first choice of the land. Lot chose the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley, which were well-watered like the garden of the Lord. Abram, on the other hand, settled in the land of Canaan, demonstrating his trust in God's promise even when circumstances seemed less favorable. Abram continued his journey through Canaan, and during his travels, he had a significant and mysterious encounter with a figure named Melchizedek. Melchizedek was the king of Salem, later known as Jerusalem, and also a priest of God Most High. Melchizedek brought out bread and wine to Abram, blessed him, and praised God for delivering Abram's enemies into his hands after a battle. This moment was deeply symbolic and foreshadowed future events, such as the establishment of priesthood and the coming sacrifice of Christ, linking Abram's story to the greater narrative of salvation. Abram, in turn, gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had acquired, signifying his gratitude and acknowledgement of God's role in his victory and blessings. As time passed, Abram continued to trust in God's guidance. However, despite his growing wealth and blessings, there was still one unfulfilled promise. He had no children to inherit the blessings God had spoken of. Abram and Sarai were already advanced in years, and the prospect of having descendants seemed unlikely. Yet, God reaffirmed his covenant with Abram. He took Abram outside one night and told him to look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed he could count them. God promised that Abram's offspring would be as numerous as the stars. This moment of divine assurance solidified Abram's faith, and he believed in the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Not long after, God sealed his promise with a formal covenant. He instructed Abram to prepare a sacrifice of animals, and then, in a vision, God passed between the pieces of the sacrifice as a smoking firepot and a blazing torch, symbolizing his commitment to the covenant. It was during this pivotal moment that God not only reaffirmed his promise to give Abram countless descendants, but also revealed that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan, and they would become a great nation. Abram's faith journey took another significant turn when God changed his name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations. This name change signified the expansion of God's covenant beyond just a personal promise to Abraham. It now encompassed the entire world, with Abraham becoming the spiritual father of nations and peoples who would one day be united under God. Despite God's promises, Sarai, later renamed Sarah, grew increasingly anxious as the years passed without a child. She convinced Abraham to take her Egyptian servant, Hagar, as a secondary wife so that she might bear a child through her. Abraham complied, and Hagar bore a son named Ishmael. However, this decision led to deep tension and conflict within the household, as Sarah grew jealous of Hagar and her son. Yet, God had not forgotten his promise to Abraham and Sarah. Miraculously, when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, she conceived and bore a son named Isaac, fulfilling God's promise. The birth of Isaac was a moment of immense joy and the ultimate affirmation of God's faithfulness. However, Sarah's jealousy of Hagar and Ishmael resurfaced, and she urged Abraham to send them away. Though reluctant, Abraham followed God's guidance and provided for Hagar and Ishmael as they journeyed into the wilderness. God assured Abraham that Ishmael would also become the father of a great nation, but the covenant would be established through Isaac. As the years passed, Sarah died, and Abraham mourned deeply for her. Even in his grief, Abraham remained faithful to God's will. He knew that Isaac needed a wife to continue the lineage that God had promised. Abraham entrusted his most faithful servant with the task of finding a wife for Isaac from his homeland, rather than from the surrounding Canaanite peoples. The servant prayed for divine guidance, and through God's providence, he met Rebekah, a kind and generous woman who agreed to become Isaac's wife. This union between Isaac and Rebekah ensured the continuation of God's covenant and the promise of a great nation through Abraham's lineage. In conclusion, the story of Abraham is a powerful testament to faith, obedience, and God's providence. Abraham's life was marked by a willingness to trust in God's promises, even when circumstances seemed impossible. From leaving his homeland to waiting for a promised son, Abraham's journey of faith stands as a shining example of righteousness and trust in God's divine plan. His legacy as the father of nations serves as a reminder to all of the blessings that come from unwavering faith and obedience to God's will.